Hello everyone, and welcome to the first of our online meetings for the People Before Profit Trade Union Week. My name is Conor Reddy and I'm the PBP representative for Dublin North West. I'm also involved in the PhD Workers Know Your Rights campaign, and tonight I'm very lucky to be joined by really, I think, esteemed and experienced panel of guests. So I'll introduce you to them in a second. Just explain a little bit first about the format. Tonight we want to really draw out the conversation. We're lucky that the three workers we have on the panel come from three different sectors and have a lot of experience. But I think the meeting would be really, really enhanced if people could leave their own comments, their own questions maybe for our panel. And after they've all spoke, we'll go to those questions and put them to our panel. So whatever burning questions you have, please do leave them in the comments. So I guess without further ado, I think it's really topical at the minute that we're having this meeting. There's obviously massive challenges for workers everywhere coming off the back of, I think, this unprecedented triple crisis that we're in of COVID and a new recession and everything that goes with it. So our panel tonight are, first of all, Ellen Cunningham. Ellen is a games developer that works with that works in obviously the video game sector, and she's a coordinator for the Game Workers Unite group, which is a global coalition of games workers of all stripes that are in Ireland part of the Financial Services Union. So Ellen is going to speak a little bit about her experience as a coordinator in that sector. After that, we're going to hear from Jerry Maguire. Jerry is a member of Unite's hospitality branch in Belfast, and he's a bar worker. So with all, I think, the problems in the hospitality sector with closures of pubs and hotels, and obviously a load of redundancies and assaults on workers coming off the back of that, Jerry has a lot, I think, that is valuable for us to hear. And then lastly, we have, and we're lucky to have Sarah Kelly, who is an elected rep with Fórsa, working in Caritas, which is a care home. It's part of the Sisters of Charity group, that was recently pushed into liquidation. So Sarah's going to talk to us about her experiences there, her experiences working in the care sector, and in fighting actually against Caritas to get fair redundancies for workers in that sector. So we're seeing now an unprecedented wave of redundancies, and probably a lot more to come, like we've seen St. Mary's, St. Monica's, and of course Debenham. So we'll hear from her last. So I think that's enough from me. We might hand over to Ellen Cunningham, who's going to speak first about her experiences.
Yeah, thanks so much, Conor. So as Conor mentioned, I'm Ellen Cunningham. I'm a 27-year-old professional game developer, specifically a game writer for the past 3 years. And I'm also chapter coordinator of Game Workers Unite Ireland, which is a national union of Irish game workers and a branch of the Financial Services Union. For anyone tuning in that isn't familiar, I'll give you a very short rundown of the games industry. So globally, the games industry is a $139 billion a year business. And in Ireland, there's over 2,000 workers employed in the game sector by over 50 different companies, doing all kinds of jobs from game development, creative content to services. These workers are very often young creatives who are extremely passionate about the work that they're doing, which makes it particularly devastating to hear about some of the issues that these workers face, which include intense and often unpaid overtime, low pay, job instability, and routine layoffs. As part of a survey that we rolled out with Game Workers Unite, we noted that 45% of people who filled out our industry survey earn less than €2,000 a month. When I started working in the Irish games industry in 2017, I was incredibly passionate and excited about my work, and I still am. But it was around this time that I heard about the issues many of my friends and colleagues were facing, and I was very lucky to be working for an independent game development studio whose leadership are extremely transparent and prioritize fair work practices. And many of my friends were facing the issues that I mentioned a second ago. And I didn't think there was anything I could do about it until I had the opportunity to attend the Game Workers Roundtable discussion at the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco in 2019. And while I was there, I heard heartbreaking stories from developers, many which echoed what I heard from my friends at home. Stories of developers uprooting their families and moving and then losing their jobs at companies. before the project even started. Stories about people signing NDAs and not being able to share their creative work, and studios simultaneously refusing to provide references for their work. And that echoed a lot of what I was hearing at home. And these developers then talked about improving their own situations by organizing at a local level with zero experience of organizing or being involved with unions. And at the time, the roundtable was hosted by Game Workers Unite, which is an international organization created to advocate for the unionization of game workers. So it itself is not a union, but many of the local chapters are unions or are working towards becoming unions. And I talked to one member of Game Workers Unite who put me in contact with the coordinator of Game Workers Unite UK, who gave me lots of valuable information and put me in contact with Paul Dillon of the Financial Services Union. So communicating and building relationships with already established unions was massively helpful in this process. And following on from that, our next big step was to launch one big Irish game workers survey. And this is valuable for a number of reasons. It allowed us to base the creation of a union and the goals of this union directly from the reports of workers themselves. It informed workers of the kind of benefits a union could provide. It provided a pressure-free way for workers to give their input and feedback and express their frustrations occasionally with their work practices and their work environments. It helped get the word out about our organizing effort as well. And the positive response and enthusiasm really surprised me in a good way. And soon after that, we had like a sudden explosion in membership and tons of people who were like enthusiastically offering to volunteer and be directly involved in what we were doing. And since that point, the FSU has been providing organizing training and encouraging workers to talk about their work issues with their colleagues, providing information and advice to workers about their legal rights, contracts, and employment rights. And they've been facilitating meetings with workers to meet other workers within their companies. And one big thing that surprised me with all of these efforts was how appreciative members have been of the support of an organized community of workers. These kinds of issues I mentioned and the environment of silence in a workplace can be extremely alienating. And it's nice to have something to alleviate that and provide an avenue for communication and community between really, really passionate creators. So having given that really, really quick rundown, I just have a couple of really quick tips for either your work in a union, setting up a union, or joining a union. So tip number one is just find people with more experience. People who work in union organizing and union members are really enthusiastic to share the work that they've been doing, and also to inform people and take time. And that's an excellent thing, and we should take advantage of, and provide that to other people. Find a way of gathering the voices of workers. And if you're thinking of joining a union as well, find a way to add your voice and make sure that you're heard. Your perspective is valuable. Try to understand the major issues affecting yourself and your colleagues and organize around those issues. Listen to and elevate the voices of marginalized workers that are often hit the hardest with these kinds of workplace issues. It's a very important point. Another point would be provide or find, depending on your industry, an accessible online space for workers. Set yourself personal and collective short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals for your organizing, so you have something tangible to work toward. Above all else, prioritize safety of members and yourself as well. Make sure you know where your information is going, and make sure you provide that to everyone else as well. Get involved is really the main thing. Don't burn out, but remember it's all on you listening to me now to search out or create a union. And if you won't do that for yourself, then we need to do it for our fellow workers, people that we hear that have harder stories than us and struggle more than us.
Thank you, Ellen. That was really, really useful, I think, particularly the tips. And I think the example that you've set in Game Workers, I think it shows us there's so many workers that work particularly in kind of new sectors. So I guess tech, games work would be a good example as well, and that haven't been organised yet, and how we need to, I think, and can take a proactive approach to getting people into unions and getting organised. So I think what you've said applies just broadly and serves a really good example. So next, I think we'll hear from Jerry Maguire from Unite Hospitality. So you want to take it away there, Jerry?
Yes, thank you very much, Connor, and thank you very much, Ellen. Those were some really good, helpful tips there. So, as Connor introduced at the start, I'm Jerry Maguire. I'm a bartender from Belfast. I'm a member of People Before Profit for over 4 years from the West Belfast Cullen branch. But I've also been working in the hospitality industry for almost 6 years this December, and I've been in Unite Community branch before I was working, and then later went into the full membership when I got my first job in a hotel. But the last 10 months, really, I've been fulfilling the role as a hospitality's equalities officer, which has been a really new and inspirational, but also educational experience for myself, because it's the first time I've really thrown myself into the deep end and wanting to get involved and wanting to really actually make a difference for people like myself in the industry. But just to give a picture of the hospitality industry itself, it's best to look at it from the outside before I give it the lens of what it's like as an actual worker. So the NI hospitality and tourism sector itself has been called the jewel in the crown of the North's economy. And this is partly down to the fact that it employs over 60,000 people, and it contributes about 1.1 billion to the North's economy annually. So when we take these figures into account, we can see that the likes of Bill Woolsey, who is a hospitality tycoon and one of the richest men in the North, his group Beyond Core, we can see that when we look at these figures, you can see that how his business in 2018 almost went up a quarter, and its profit revenue by 23.7 million. So it's fair to say that the hospitality industry itself for the bosses is a great game to be in when we look at these figures. But when we look at it from the perspective of the workers, it's a completely different situation. It's a completely different story altogether. But as socialists and trade unionists, we know that that all these profits, they're not mysteriously appearing, but it's the actual fruits of our unpaid labour. But so how do they come about getting this? Well, first of all, the bosses have been in a proactive situation of suppressing and our pay packets for a number of years, and the minimum wage scheme really helps because it's a minimum and they pay the minimum. But 0-hour contracts are the norm, and there's no guarantees for a lot of workers that they're going to get enough hours on the rota to be able to put food on the table or to pay their rent. And this is a massive issue in and of itself. But when we add into the fact of poverty pay to the situation, we can see that it's a really dire situation. And this is where we can start to see what it's like for a hospitality worker. With these 0-hour contracts, the lack of job security, the high turnover of staff, and the stress that comes with that, the long shifts and issues of sexual harassment within workplaces, you would assume that the hospitality sector would be boiling over with worker struggles. But unfortunately, this is not the case yet. The hospitality industry has had a very low trade union density for decades now. This is matched with people not really knowing what trade unions are or what to do, has sort of normalised and entrenched the issues that I've already mentioned. But this has begun to change. I would want to stress that trade union representation and awareness in our sector is on the rise. So about 2 years ago, just to give a bit of the background of Unite Hospitality and itself, the branch was set up and launched 2 years ago to try and organise a sector that previously hadn't been, and to try and make real improvements for those who work in it. So we had a branch launch in the upstairs of a bar I currently work in now, which is a great experience. But at the actual meeting, like, I want to talk a bit about how like enthusiastic people were about it. As Ellen was saying about when they were getting creation of their branch, how enthusiastic people were that this was getting kicked off. That like literally people had to be turned away from the meeting because the room was at capacity. There was people standing in the doorway in the hallway, and since then the branch has been getting off to a really good start. We've just had increases in numbers, and during the lockdown period itself, we actually seen a doubling of our membership. So the hospitality branch itself has it's almost like a microcosm of the industry at large. It is mostly young workers, with mostly female workers out of that, and workers from different backgrounds and from different ethnicities. And that microcosm of the branch itself sort of reflects that. But I want to talk a bit about the ways in which that we've been particularly good at getting new workers to come into the union and get active. One way that we've done so is what we would call walkarounds, and it's literally just a walk around of the bars in the town in the city centre. But we use little cards, know your right cards, that contain information like what the minimum wage should be, how long you should be getting for your breaks, certain legislation, but also illicit demands that we fight for. So we use this as a technique is when we go into workplaces. We go in at times where we're not going to be of bother or a nuisance, but we introduce our sort of chats with the workers around the cards. We pass them out, we get them talking about it, we invite them to talk more. We also use city centre stalls of doing a similar thing. We set up in an area which has a dense sort of places, workplaces where we can try and catch workers starting shifts and finishing shifts, try and get chats. But I think our social media has been a real effective tool for us. We've used the social media in a number of successful ways, not just pushing our demands and what we've been fighting for and pushing for rights, but we've used it to express solidarity with other workers' campaigns, particularly like the likes of the Debenham strike that's happening in the south at the minute. We've expressed solidarity with that. We've also used it well to call against the fines and prosecutions that brought on members who attended a socially distanced protest for Black Lives Matter in June. But these are ways in which that we've used the social media well, but we've also used it for actually getting wins in our campaign. I'll give an example of a cafe where we had a worker come to us and said that they had worked over 23 plus hours over a couple of days, and they were told after the fact that this was a trial shift, more or less a trial week. What we used the social media to do was we put this up and said that this is this is wage theft, called it out as it was, and subsequently the business and new business decided it was going to pay all those trial shifts back to the people that had on its books. So this was a great win, and it's an effective way in which that we can organise around. But for the likes of walkarounds and the stalls and stuff like that, it's helped in bringing issues to the union in order for what we know we can operate on and fight for. But because of all the low sort of union consciousness amongst hospitality workers, it's meant that like we've had to deal with situations where we're explaining for the first time what unions are and what they do, and sort of the key concepts around recognition and uniting on certain principles. But we also get questions like they don't do anything. And one way I think is a great way to combat that question, or to put it in a different lens, is to point to the actual recent worker struggles that have taken place and that have won, particularly in the north and the south. I mean, like the Harn and Wolff occupation in 2019, where Harn and Wolff workers occupied their site, their shipyard, to keep it saved, and they won on it. The Allied Bakery workers who were fighting for better pay, they had a strike at the start of the year. They had won. The nurses for the RCN in Unison, who were standing on picket lines all throughout December, braving the weather to fight for pay parity with the rest of the UK, which they already should have been entitled to. They took that action and they won. But even for hospitality workers, there's examples that we can draw out and we can look to and we can try and emulate. I mean, the TGI Friday workers, they took strike over tips and minimum wage abuses. McDonald's workers who were striking for £10 an hour, and the Wetherspoons who their staff had forced a U-turn from management because the management wasn't going to furlough their staff, but their workers threatened strike action, and they done a full U-turn as well as put them on full pay, and it was 100%. But so just to bring this discussion to an end, I really just want to stress the importance for young workers to get involved in trade unions, but particularly hospitality workers. I think the points that Alan had made, those tips are very useful, and I completely agree. But I'd also want to stress that people should definitely get involved, because if there's one thing that's been consistent about the coronavirus pandemic, it's been how magnified and sort of deepened the division, the gap between bosses and workers has become, and how clear that is. I mean, when we look at the likes of the furlough scheme and the subsidies that were given to businesses, particularly within the hospitality industry, the big subsidies, the rent freezes for all the businesses, but yet workers are having their furlough cut and cut and cut again. And now we're at the stage where come November, we're going to be on 33% of whatever. And for 0-hour contracts, workers who aren't guaranteed hours, what are they getting 33% of? I think we really need to be pushing, and that at the absolute minimum, and the furlough scheme should be extended, and that it's going to be in place there, and it's going to be at 100% pay. But the only best way to do that is when you have workers leading within their unions to do so. But I definitely recommend people take the tips that Alan had said pretty seriously. But if you're already a member, get involved, reach out to your union, get talking to them, take any training that's coming up, and try and best practice it. But talk to your co-workers, organise with your co-workers, set up a group chat, talk about your issues that you're feeling, and speak to the union, get them into the group chat, because that's where we'll start, because it's in workplaces that we do have the power, and it's the unions that have the power as well. But when we unite, we can make a difference.
Thanks, Jerry. That was again really, really insightful, and I think built on what Sarah was saying about practically how we should be engaging with unions and how we should be leading in unions. I think that point that you made at the end there about how we should all be getting proactively involved in our workplaces, taking trainings, and trying to get others to join. That really can't stress the importance of that enough. So I think there should be in one of the comment sections a link to a website, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions website, which will help people to find the unions that might be appropriate for them in their workplaces. So that should be in the comment section. People will find it there, and of course. There is also a link to get involved with People for Profit in building, I guess, a network of fighters within trade unions, and we can help with some of that practical stuff as well, like building unions and organising workplaces. So I'll come now to our last intro from Sarah Kelly, and just to remind people, Sarah is a Fórsa rep working in Caritas in the care sector. So Sarah might give us some of the background from there.
Hi everyone, well done Alan and Jerry, very good. I'm Sarah Kelly. I've been working in Caritas, was working in Caritas for the last 23 years. I have been in a union for 16 years, and in the last few years I've been union rep. What I will say is, when you're joining a union, there's certain things you need to know. And the things you really need to know is what the actual union are going to do for you. So you need to pick the right union for yourself. The whole point of the link going up for the trade unions, Congress, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, they will give you the actual proper trade union that will fight for you and give you the best representation that you can get. So do get onto them. You can ring them or get onto their online network and they will get back to you, okay? So what is a trade union and what they will do for you? Now, I'm in an industry where a lot of people are involved in a union. So they're going back for the last couple of decades. So when you walk in, it's probably one of the first things you'll be asked. In the care industry, a lot of people are involved in the union. So go and speak to them. If they're, most of the time, it will be somebody will come to you first. If not, and there is an issue, that's more times than not that you're actually looking for a union, is when there is an issue. But they are there to help. Colleagues, not even management in some cases, they are there to turn around and say, this is what you need to do. So it's obviously your policies, everyone needs to know. So you should read your workplace policies so you know where you stand. So what a union will do for you, they'll protect your rights as a worker. We will. They'll give you peace of mind knowing that you have support behind you. If you need help from your colleagues, they're there to support you. unity. The majority of the time, you'll only really need the union when something goes wrong, but they are there all the time. They will have an open line of communication with yourself anytime you need. If it's training, if it's something that you're interested in and you'd like to get involved, build up your knowledge on the union, they're there for that. Union rep or shop steward, which what I would be, they're quite happy to talk to anybody about the union, anyone that'll listen. So get involved, ask questions. It's the only way anyone learns. As I say, I've 16 years doing union work. It's very interesting. You're constantly learning all the time, and most of the time you're learning as the job goes on. So when something arises, we don't know the answers. The union are there to give us advice. They're there to negotiate on your behalf. And at the end of the day, you need support. If you don't know what you're talking about, you always need to find somebody that does. If there are changes in the workplace, which has come around a lot lately, at the moment, they ensure you're treated with fairness and consulted on how changes are brought around. Dispute resolution procedures is what the union do best. They will walk you through it, they'll support you through it. A couple of examples, a couple of the not so great examples is GDPR breaches. You've also got bullying in the workplace, but then there's also the changes of your contract, your hours and your pay. These things all come along very soon. Lately, they'll be coming along a lot more. They'll instruct you how to on your policies and procedures, and they'll assist you in where you need to go. They'll talk to management on your behalf or with you. As I say, an open line of communication with the unions, mainly at the moment, is either on phone or email. Most of the time, before COVID, they would have came into your workplace once, twice a year. If you needed them, they were there, but they are there constantly on the end of the line if you need any assistance. If you're not in a union and you need to get yourself up and running and you're talking to a few colleagues and how to go about it, the thing is, you need to research. At the end of the day, you need to do a little bit of work to get a lot of help. The union will also have lawyers, the financial services. They're all available to you. They're also under training centres. They're all available. So you can increase your own knowledge and basically help your colleagues at the end of the day also. Just to say, for the likes of getting it out to new members of staff, there's newsletters that are sent every couple of months to your workplace from your particular union. You can leave them in the staff room. You can get them, have a look, have a read. You don't have to say have a look or have a read, just leave them sitting there. Majority of people will pick one up when they're having a cup of tea and sit down and have a look at it. Then there's also encouraging non-members to speak to members, see how they're getting on, if they need any help with anything. Communication is key when it comes to unionising anything. If you know who to go and talk to, so if you're going around and something goes wrong and they say, that's the union rep, go and have a chat with her or him, it just introduces them. Whether you've been a union rep or shop steward, an open mind, everything is confidential. Absolutely everything is confidential when you're a union rep or steward. Nothing goes past that person with yourself and management. It says in the room, it doesn't come out. So you need to learn that responsibility if you're going to take on the role of a union rep. Also, I would say is open a line for discussion with your own colleagues who are in the union, get their ideas, take them on board. At the end of the day, not one person can think of everything. And if there is an issue coming up like us at the moment with the liquidation and everything, it's a collective. A lot of people coming together, getting their questions out. We email that forward to the union and they take action. And that's what the union are there for. You need to push the union to take that action, but they will take it on board. And at the end of the day, you're pushing for them to do the best for you. They're fighting for your rights. And there's also, sorry, then, so the union will be quite realistic with you. They will tell you straight out if it's a doable situation, if it's not, but they can negotiate to get a better deal than what you were originally being offered. So the likes of the WRC, the Workers' Relation Commission, the Labour Court, they're there if an issue can't be resolved in a workplace. The union will advise you, they will stay with you, and they will support you as you go through that whole sector. It's a completely different ballgame. We've been through it ourselves over the years, and you really do, that's where you need backing of a union. So what I would say is, if anyone is young and not too confident about speaking to people about it, talk to your family, talk to your parents. Anyone over 40 has been in some sort of union dispute or knows somebody that has. Back in the 80s and mid-90s, there was a lot of protests, union work going on, and this is what we need to build up again. We need to get everybody back into the union, basically to make sure your rights are being looked after, because management aren't going to do it unless you fight for it yourself. So I'll leave there. If you have any questions.
Thanks for that, Sarah. That was, again, really useful. I think it's a great part of this meeting is that we've gotten kind of insight from yourself, someone that's been around the union movement for quite a long time and has seen how it works and all its different structures. And then on the other hand, we have people like Ellen and Jerry who are, I guess, quite new to organising and union work, so you get the broad gamut of things there. I'm actually just going to hand over, before we go to questions, to Ellen again to maybe recap over some of the points that she made. I think there was some technical difficulties, unfortunately, with our Facebook stream earlier on. So our Facebook stream wasn't quite linked up with the comments, and we're not sure if people actually got Ellen's initial intro. So maybe if you give us a quick overview again of the practical side of things that you ran through, Ellen, that would be great.
Yeah, sure, that's no problem at all. So just to quickly kind of recap what I mentioned earlier in the stream for us, for the tech issues and everything. I'm essentially a coordinator for Game Workers Unite Ireland, which is a Irish chapter, a local national chapter of a global organization effort to get game workers to organize. Essentially, I went from zero organizing effort to organizing a union for game workers here, basically due to following a couple of simple kind of tips and learning through basically failing and experience and stuff. So I'll just give you some of my practical tips that I mentioned earlier, which is to find people with more experience than you, to talk to, if you haven't got a union set up, talk to unions in other countries that do similar stuff to what you're trying to do, or unions that might be similar in industry to the one you're thinking of setting up. And if you're thinking of joining a union, talk to those union members, talk to union organizers in those unions, and do a little bit of research and find out what works for you. Find a way of gathering the voices of workers or making your own voice heard and making sure it's heard. Try to identify some of the major issues that is affecting you and also your colleagues to organize around. Identifying that can be helpful in a bunch of different ways. One very important thing is to listen to and elevate the voices of marginalized workers, members of marginalized groups who are workers in the same industry as you. These people are often hit the hardest with workplace issues, so it's a very important thing to keep in mind. Try to provide or find an accessible online space to talk and organize and learn. Set yourself personal and collective short-term, mid-term and long-term goals for organizing, so you have something tangible and trackable to work towards. Prioritize your own personal safety and safety of members above everything else. It's very, very important. And then the number one thing is just to get involved, you know, like do that little bit of research. Like every additional person that gets involved means it's less work for everyone involved. And at the end of the day, a union is you and your colleagues and your friends and other workers doing the same thing as you're doing. So if you don't want to work toward and create a union for yourself, think about working towards and creating a union for people who are worse off than you in the same industry.
Thanks for that, Ellen.
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple of questions here that came in from our old Facebook stream, the one that we had the technical difficulties with. So they're not quite with us yet. So we might go to some of our more recent ones first. I guess the first one that we'll touch on here is from Dermot. And Dermot asks, I think quite an important one. He says, great talk. How would we go about mobilising or building the confidence of workers in sectors without traditional union representation, where trade union officials won't necessarily interfere when it's needed? So I think I might go to Jerry first on that one, if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely. You know what? That's definitely a great question, Jim. I would definitely say like confidence is key. It really is when it comes down to these matters. And I mean, like, as Ellen had said, like you do have to prioritize your safety here when it comes to even job security. When it comes to it, so at the end of the day, when you are trying to organise within your own workplace, you don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardise that. And it's definitely a difficult situation if your union leadership isn't going to come too quickly on board with you. But I think, as Sarah had said in her introduction, that you have to push them. You do have to push them, and they will tell you. But if you push them and you have the support of your workers, your co-workers, you'll win. But I definitely think that pushing them is definitely central. But one way I found personally with building up the confidence is start off small. Just start off with simple stuff in your workplace. If you're having serious grievances, and even grievances that your coworkers are feeling deeply and widely, start off small. Whether it's everybody go for a smoke at the same time, you're all walking off. Whether it's for me, it's everybody walking off the bar and going for a cigarette. You know, that's a small thing, but it's the collective action there. It's every one of you took the decision to do that, and that's how you start. You start small and you build your way up. I mean, you're not going to go straight to a strike, which would be class if you could. But this is the thing: you have to start off small, but you have to be realistic of where you want to go with your campaign, and but you definitely have to push the leadership of trade unions. At the end of the day, if you're a trade union member, you're paying your subs, and they have to side with you because you're a sub pair. Like, so, I would definitely, that would be my tips.
Thanks for that, Jerry. Do you want to come in on that maybe as well, Ellen? Because I think it'd probably be relevant to you too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just because we're, again, a young industry organising for sure. I think part of this is down to workers organising amongst themselves. At the end of the day, a union is composed of the workers in the industry. I feel like union organisers, you know, have an important but minor role in comparison to the collective work of workers creating a community, communicating and organising amongst themselves. And that's where the power lies at the end of the day. So yeah, absolutely. I think you need to be prepared to, you know, directly address issues that you have with union organisers if that's the case. I mean, as of this moment, like I've been very lucky. My work at FSU has been fantastic. But absolutely, and need to be prepared to, you know, always question the decisions that you're making and who you're working with. And I absolutely think that's true. But at the end of the day, it's a collective effort of everyone who's involved in the union.
What about you, Sarah? I know this one is kind of specifically looking at sectors where there isn't traditional union representation, but I think that question, like, of trade union officials not necessarily intervening when it's needed, is maybe one to come at, because I think just from being involved with the Debenham strike and from other things recently, there is sometimes, and unfortunately, cynicism around I think trade unions and particularly trade union officials. How do we work against that and I guess reinstill confidence in unions?
I completely agree. There's been moments where we've had it ourselves, and basically we've just bombarded the unions just to get them to pick up the fight. We've literally bombarded them with emails, phone calls, but it's also very hard for people who are in the union who haven't had any backing to keep that trust. It's to build that trust back up with the unions and get them on board on what your actual cause is. So it's getting the message across in a state where they understand what you want, what you need to do to get there, work together to get to that place, and then hopefully you get into the right place where you want to be, the end goal. But it is very hard. It's very frustrating too sometimes, very frustrating. But you have to persevere. You literally just have to keep going and going until they get the picture and they start backing you until you get what you need or as close to as what you can get, because not all the time you get exactly what you want. Negotiations are key. The union are key to negotiations. They get you to that table. So this is where you have to build a relationship with a union. You really do. Sometimes it's over simple things and then it builds up to something bigger. But if you can build that relationship, it makes such a difference. And they know where you're coming from. They know what type of worker you are. If you're going out of your way to give them the material that they need to get you to the place where you want to go.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I think there's an interesting point to all of this, and it's that there's maybe unfortunately been kind of a culture within unions of just paying your dues and not really engage. And I think what we have to, if we're going to make unions relevant again, is revive this culture of people actually seeing the union as theirs to lead. And that's, like you said, all about building up communication with the union, but also I think organisation within them. So just to make people aware again, People Before Profit have set up now a trade union department. It's a fairly new endeavour of ours. And what we hope to do with that, I think, is build these sort of informal networks of workers in different unions. I'm in SIP2 myself as a PhD worker, and I think through that, I'll be able to meet other people that are in SIP2 that are in my sector in education. I can work with to make sure that our voices are heard by our unions. So I think just if people are intent and interested and compelled with the arguments made here, there is a link in the comment sections again that I encourage everyone to leave their details with. And that'll help us to, I think, build the voice of workers within existing unions. Okay, so I'm going to come to another comment here. Now, this one's a bit messy because it's a copy-paste job of a couple of comments from the other old stream. So bear with us. I'll call them out kind of as individual questions. Okay, so the first question here that we have is from James Larmer, and James asks, great example of the so-called trial shifts that are yet another example of wage theft. Hospitality hates bad publicity, calling these exploiters out and shaming them and calling for boycotts makes a big difference. Okay, so that's just a comment. Do you want to come back on that, Jerry? I think it's probably directed to you.
Yeah, I think definitely. Because I mean, the whole sort of thing about bars and clubs and hospitality businesses, particularly in Belfast, is their whole image. And they spend a lot of money trying to create a very, very nice and tidy PR image about themselves of being decent employers, and sometimes you find that because they're local, that doesn't because the business is local, that doesn't automatically mean it's going to be a great place to work for, that they're going to be a fair employer. So I think Jim's comment about how that they're all about the publicity is absolutely true. But when we have, for example, had to call out bad practices, whether it was the example of the unpaid trial shifts, the wage theft, that was one. But we had also the case where another cafe up around the north coast, around the Giant's Causeway, had decided they weren't going to pay staff holidays, and a number of staff were owed over £300 odd. That was quickly reissued when a couple of tweets went up. So it really comes back to the fact that they don't want the bad publicity, and especially when you have a union weighing in, with its social media and its outreach and with all that what that entails, the last thing they want is a boycott or their image tainted. So I think Jim's absolutely correct there.
Maybe I'll put that question to the other two on the panel. Generally, do you think that the ultimate weapon I think we have as workers is withdrawing our labour and the strike? But there are obviously important things that can be done in terms of reputation and more symbolic action. So I don't know. Do you think there's a role for that in, say, game workers, Ellen?
Absolutely. And when you mentioned about different forms of wage theft, one thing that really comes to mind for game workers, but also this applies to tech workers and media workers in general as well, is the concept of unpaid internships, where someone has, the opportunity to do what is essentially a lot of the time necessary work, where they would have to be replaced if they left. There's no organized training. There's no nothing really being offered to this person apart from like the opportunity to do free labor. And that's completely unacceptable in the vast majority of the time, except for maybe specifically organized educational positions for students where they're offered quite a lot in return for their time and work. So absolutely. And I think that a lot of this could also come down to altering and checking the expectations of younger people entering these kinds of industries as well, and making sure that they know what the base standards of their work should be.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I think just from personal experience, even like you see a kind of constant erosion of what we can expect as sort of young workers, and I think that's really born out of just a culture of not being aware of what like we can and should expect when we go into work. So I know I mentioned before I'm involved with a group that tries to organise PhDs. And I know over the last number of years is kind of an increasing reliance on us to do some of the grunt work, teaching, demonstrating, all of these things that like our work and do contribute to kind of value in the universities or research place that we work. But it's unpaid or it's lowly paid. And I think the justification they use a lot of the time is that it's part of our educational experience or development. But this wasn't the case before. So I think, being aware of how things can be, how they were, and how they ought to be is an important point of departure. I'm going to go direct question for you now, Sarah, just from one of our viewers here. Okay, so it's actually at the bottom of this. Again, apologies to everyone for it being messy.
Yeah.
It's how do you find organising workers in private care homes in particular? And do you have any ideas or tips to meet potential members when employers are hostile to unions?
Well, whether they're hostile or not, it's everyone's right to join a union. So they will have to engage even if there's only one person, but if you've got a number of people that are willing to go and join a union together and then have the union contact the job. So it's basically sitting down with your colleagues, finding out what their issues are, looking at how many people you have, direct contact with a union and ask them to contact management on your behalf to fix any issues that you might have. So it's the job for yourself first is to get how many members together, open up a group, a WhatsApp group, anything like that. Have a conversation with one another and see exactly what you're looking for. So get it down in black and white, what your issues are, what you want the union to do on your behalf, and then let them take over and contact management. And that means you're not directly dealing with management at the time. See how that goes,
And what about the more general question? I know there's obviously a number of issues in Caritas where you are, and there have been issues in St. Monica's and St. Mary's. How do you find organising and working in the care sector at the minute? What do you think the major challenges are there?
The care sector at the minute, with us being closed, each house has their own union rep, and it's their responsibility to get any information. Now, with GDPR, we're being very careful on how that information's passed. When it is passed on, we have to get everybody's permission to pass on their information to the union. You have to be very careful on how you do things. And when it's passed on, that's deleted off anyone's personal phone, laptop, whatever. At the minute, it's all fine because everyone has the same goal. They want a proper redundancy. When the goal is reached, you have to wipe everything off your phone. You have to be so careful as a rep what you're doing with people's information. You have to inform them of how their information is being used, and also to keep in contact with whatever the union sends them back. You pass that on to every colleague. So if you take people's phone numbers, you take their email addresses, you need everyone's permission to set it up in one group, and then you can go forward. But you have to be careful on, if you're organising, if you're a rep, always have a backup beside you. So somebody else that will intervene if you're not there on a day and something important comes in. So there's always two reps. So not one bit of information is being seen by just one person. It's being seen by two people, and then they pass it on to the rightful individuals. But it is a very, you have to be pretty organised doing it, but it is a lot of work to take on, but it is very rewarding work. When you know that you've fought for your colleagues that I've worked with for over 20 years with a lot of them, it really does make a difference in your soul, basically, to know that you're doing your best for them and they're willing to stand behind you and support you in what they're doing. So if you've got, we were like a family. So if you've got colleagues that you're working with and they're having a hard time and you want to get involved in a union, get together, sit down, chat, get online, text each other. It does make a big difference, especially when you have a union that's going to fight for you like we have. It really does. It gives you confidence and a little bit of peace of mind to know that somebody is actually there behind you saying, no, we've got your back. And that's the same with your colleagues. So it is. That answers your question.
It absolutely does. Thanks for that, Sarah. So I'm going to ask you first, Jerry, and then you after, Ellen. There's a part at the end of that question I just asked Sarah that I think is worth touching on. It comes up here again, another question from Alex. And it's how can we build the confidence of workers in areas like bar work where there are worries about repercussions that can be strong? So, I mean, we all hear stories, and a friend of mine actually works in the bar industry, was victimised when he tried to unionise in his workplace, and ended up having a case of unfair dismissal when he tried to join a union and get others to do the same. So how do you think we get people, some people, when you mention the word union, they just they're afraid of the consequences there might be, if they might be victimised, like my friend that I mentioned was. So maybe you first, Jerry, and then you on that, Ellen.
Yeah, I think with that point, there's, to a certain degree, you have to keep your organising on the hush hush, especially if it's a workplace where you think your employer or anyone in management might come down heavy on you. So I mean, as our speakers had said earlier, like you're not going to go straight into your job and first day, right? Who wants to join? Or leaflets or join forms? You know, you don't want to do that unless you know you're going to win straight away. But I mean, you have to be very tactical about how you approach people, how you phrase your question. But it's hard to do it within your workplace. So I think, as Sarah had said there about getting a WhatsApp going or getting a meeting going, that's absolutely key. I mean, we're now living in the age of Zoom. You can have a virtual meeting as easy as that. It's that simple. You can get your colleagues on. You're outside of the workplace. You can discuss these things in confidence, but you need to be careful. Because as Alan had said earlier, like when you're organising, you prioritise your own safety, and that includes the safety of your job. You know, because at the end of the day, if unions weren't effective at making change, employers wouldn't fear them. And that's the reality of it. Your employers fear the union getting involved in its workplace because it knows it's going to the employer is going to have to capitulate its demands. If the workers take action, it's going to lose its profit. There's going to be a shift in the balance of power. But you have to be discreet about how you go about organising. Speak to the people who you think are receptive, but have general discussions. And just talk it through with your colleagues and find out where they're at, I would say.
Thanks for that, Jerry. And what do you think on that one, Ellen, about confidence?
Yeah, I actually think Jerry did that pretty well, to be honest, and I agree with everything he said about, like, number one, it's also starting slow, giving people the opportunity to ask questions and be interested, answering the questions that they have, dispelling any myths they might have been told about unions as well. And also talking through, like, the basic logic of unions. I mean, from my perspective, when it applies to my industry, it's not sustainable. A lot of what's happening in the games industry globally, not just in this country, but, like, it's very unsustainable. The idea of, like, unpaid, intense, constant, planned overtime, leads to people burning out of the industry and leaving. This is just not sustainable, and we love this industry. Like, workers and employers, like, both love making games and being involved in the industry they're in, and I think that's very common. And we want to see it be as efficient and sustainable and positive for every individual involved as possible, and for everyone to get the value of what they put in. So in the end, we have very reasonable goals that I think we want to work towards as a collective. So that's the first thing I think I would explain to a lot of people. And then, yeah, also just providing, like, pressure-free opportunities for people to ask questions and be curious and talk to, their friends and colleagues. And I agree with you about, if you're already involved in a union, or if you're already an organizer or coordinator or just a member, approaching other people, talking about if you've had positive experiences, talking about, why you are a member, why you're part of that effort, with your colleagues and friends. And I think that can have a big effect on people, because people appreciate, I think, for the majority of the time, the opinions of their friends and colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, on that matter, I think there's a relevant question here as well. And it's what are some of the issues that you've got people to join up over? So I think, like, often it can be a personal story or something that will convince someone to join a union, or to see the importance of a union. So I might go straight back to you on that one first, Ellen, and then follow up with the others.
Yeah, of course. That was actually, for the vast majority of members who have joined, there's, like, very specific major issues that they've been faced with. A lot of the time it's low pay. It's a lot of people who, are living with 4 or 5 people paying rent, no savings, paycheck to paycheck, and there's a lot of people who are struggling with, unstable jobs, unstable contracts, a lot of people working unpaid overtime, planned unpaid overtime, who are, like, wrecked at the end of every single day, and just looking desperately for any solution to this that isn't leaving the industry entirely and just completely changing their entire life, essentially, and changing their entire area of work. And I think as well, for a lot of people, it's been kind of the attitude, like I mentioned earlier, of, like, positively wanting to affect the sector as well. So we all have, these kind of shared goals with each other. And I think that's, along with those kind of, and also having a group of people, like a community of workers, like I said, to alleviate that kind of alienation, because you have these issues, and those issues feel like they're only affecting you, until you start to hear about the amount of people in, for a while, a 20-foot vicinity around you in your office, who are all affected by the same issue. And you're surprised, a lot of people have been surprised. And, I think when they sit in a room with each other and hear each other, and they all say, yeah, this is ridiculous and completely unacceptable, and they start to get very enthusiastic, very active, and very involved. And I think, the sharing of your personal experience has a massive positive effect on organization.
Thanks for that, Ellen. What about you, Sarah? Some issues that people have joined or seen the relevance of unions on the back of?
Well, at the moment it's liquidation. We had an awful lot of people join directly due to liquidation, but there's always issues down to pay. We're in the care sector, so there'll be increments every couple of years. You get increments, not being paid on time, bullying in the workplace, just scheduling, looking for holiday days with other people that you work with. There's a magnitude of stuff that can come up, but they will come and talk and say, what can we do? Mainly bullying in the workplace would have been one of the major issues coming. day-to-day staff management. It's everywhere at the moment because people are stressed out. They're feeling fatigued. They're under pressure to get a job done with less staff. And then you're looking at, for our industry, PPE not being accessible. So there's plenty of stuff. So people come to you for their specific reason. And then, but it's mainly talking to other staff members, understanding where they're coming from. Saying they feel the same way. So they're saying, what are the union doing for you? And then it's taken forward from there. More times than not, it's when they have an issue in our industry. That's when people come and ask, majority of the time.
Thanks for that, Sarah. And to round that one off, do you want to come in, Jerry, or to add anything?
Yeah, definitely. I think some of the issues I've personally had experience with trying to get people to join is overpay. You know, it's something as basic as that, but it's that much of an issue that it touches everybody in the industry and nearly all industries, because as people in the working world, as workers, we're not in the same privilege as those who employ us. You know, we have to go to work because otherwise, how can we afford to live in our own houses? You know, this is issues that all of us feel, no matter what industry we're in. But it shouldn't have to be this way. But with that issue, I found that organising within the workplace around trying to better that, whether it's trying to fight for a better division of tips, because some workplaces, particularly in the hospitality, the management keep the tips when that's theft. You know, so pay affects everybody, and I feel like that's a sort of the issue. Getting people talking about. You can quickly garner them to come around the union, especially if they know that there's the whole backing of the union. There's so many hundreds of thousands of members that you can pull in at any time. You know, across industries when it's on these issues of pay. That's what I would like to add to the discussion.
Thanks for that, Jerry. We're going to go next to a question from Gus, and for this one I think I might take Sarah first, because I think it's maybe one that she disproves in her own work practically. So it's, how do we mitigate against a lack of willing by members and representatives approaching retirement, or I guess people that are in the job longer, and their reluctance towards meaningful actions that protect the interests of those of younger disposition? I know situations indicate self-interest is at the forefront of sections of ageing members and representatives' decision making. So how would the panel combat that? And I think the fact that you organise a kind of workplace where there are workers of all ages, and you said how you represent the interests of workers generally goes against that. But do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, listen, you're not going to make people do what you want to do. You're not, no matter what road you go down. In my experience, it is mainly the older workers that are pushing towards the union, not necessarily everybody. But a union is a collective of members of staff. So whatever the collective want is what you go for, whether older members want it or not, or older staff members want it or not. It is a collective, and you have to go with the collective, and that's why you vote on everything. You know, at the end of the day, you have to look after everybody. They are going to be retiring, and you're going to be left there in the same situation. So it's just to talk to people, give them their point of view and why you're looking to unionize and go down that road. Like, at the end of the day, everyone is an individual. It's their choice, and if they don't want to do it themselves, leave you to it. Let you do your job. You're doing your job anyway, but let you do it in the best positive way. And if you can be productive and talk to management in the sense of, this might work better for us, or these are issues that we have, where can we go? You know, but as I say, it's done on a vote. The whole point of a union is that you vote for mandate, and they just have to get on with it. Simple as.
Thanks for that one, Sarah. And I might actually add a little bit to the question before I put it to you, Ellen and Jerry. I think there's sometimes, and I've seen examples of this kind of directly, of particularly in workplaces where there's like a closed shop where everyone's a member of the union. And sometimes I know in retail in particular, there can be a problem where young workers might vote as a block for, say, a small pay rise because it means something materially to them in that very immediate sense and in that moment. But for the workers who are there longer, for the more full-time workers and stuff like that, they might have strong reasons to vote against it. So I've seen in a couple of shops, one place where I worked, I won't name it, for summer, all the younger workers voted for a small pay rise, all the older ones voted against it, because at the end of the day, they were there for the long haul, whereas the likes of us were there for seasonal work. So that kind of generational dynamic, just generally, if you could maybe comment on it, and how do we kind of build more solidarity within unions across kind of generational lines. Maybe Ellen first on that one.
Sure. So I think that it's a really interesting issue. And I think this actually applies in more areas than just generational aspects as well. There's other, groups that might be benefited from, one vote or real change or would benefit from no action in a certain area. And I think this comes down to kind of multiple different factors. So one, I think, is if you person listening wants to have their voice heard and their perspective heard, I think that it all comes back to this kind of direct involvement, like get involved and make sure your voice is heard, and your reasoning is heard as well. Like, if you can explain to someone the logic behind what it is you want, and, if older generations can explain to younger generations, like why it is that long-term goals are really important for them and for everyone involved, I think that we can all benefit from hearing out those people from each group and, and adding our voices to that conversation. And I think a major aspect of this as well is union training to talk about, historical context to a certain extent, and then also educating people about elevating the voices of certain groups of people. Making sure that every group is heard, and specifically groups that are more traditionally marginalized as well. Yes, I think we all benefit from hearing the logic behind the opinions of every member of a union. And that's where our worth is as a collective group, is as a group of people from a variety of different backgrounds with different perspectives and views on a situation. And I think it's all going to come down to honing our ability to communicate with one another and making sure that we're actively involved in what we're doing.
Okay, I kind of want to maybe develop that a little bit more before I put it to you, Jerry. I think you touched on the importance of training, Ellen. I think just again from experience, the concept of solidarity, like in a practical sense, I think is something maybe that needs to be cultivated a bit more in unions. Kind of seeing that we need to stand with marginalised groups of workers, for example, why that's important, why it's not just about doing a solid for your marginalised colleagues. It's actually about the strength of the union. If you don't do that, you weaken your own position. And I don't know, like, what's your experience been of maybe education and training, Jerry? What kind of change do you think needs to happen inside unions to improve upon that?
Well, I think definitely what needs to happen a lot more so, and I can't speak for other unions, but I think definitely needs to happen more so is the union leadership and unions generally need to reflect the society that they're supposedly, the workers they're supposedly representing. And that means that we do need more female voices. We do need more BAME voices in there, and we need that representation is key. But when it comes to the workplace, how we mitigate against that is that the workplace is the purest form of democracy, of direct democracy within the workplace. That when we can discuss the collective, as Sarah was saying, when we can discuss as a collective within our workplaces, we can mitigate against this by discussion and having the frank, open discussion. And if it is the case that older workers are preferring something and union workers or younger workers are looking for something different, the only way that to come between that is to discuss that out, flesh it out, try and get down to the root of what's actually going on here. And what we're seeing is that even though that there may be slight difference. At the end of the day, we're both workers, and we're under the same pressure from our bosses. We're still being divided by them. So even though the one small issue that older workers are preferring something else, I think that these things are overridden by the fact that we're still being exploited. We're still being pushed into the ground. Our wages are just abysmal. And I think these things are bigger than that. But the only way to overcome that is for discussion.
Thanks for that, Jerry. Just to draw the conversation out a little bit further, I think again we've talked about the importance of education around generally around unions, and we mentioned marginalised workers. So to kind of put 2 and 2 together and get 5, I'm going to ask a question kind of on how unions can be a jumping off point for addressing these sort of larger social questions of say race and racism, sexism generally, even economic or bread and butter issues like housing. I think young people in the last number of years in Ireland have really led on these issues through repeal. In the summer when we had the Black Lives Matter movement, we've seen young people again at the forefront of something that was militant and exciting and calling for a kind of a fundamentally different kind of society. So I don't know, how does that feed into, do you think, what we do in unions in the workplace, and how do unions maybe have a role to play in those bigger movements? I think we'd all like to have seen the union movement get more involved, particularly in housing as an issue. And I think the might that the trade union movement has, if we were to kind of organise workers take some type of action on housing, I think we'd all welcome that. So maybe generally, how do you see the kind of interface between those two things, young people being really engaged with social questions and the union movement not being there yet? I might go to Ellen on you first, since you're nodding your head.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned before, this is just a major issue for so many people because the game industry is like a young industry, relatively speaking, in comparison to others, but also that the average worker age is a lot younger, and a lot of the game work is being done in larger cities in Ireland. There's a huge issue with pay and housing, and that's like a massive core element to it. And we're seeing a lot of people have discussions about unionizing at other political events as well. Like a lot of people who are politically active are also active in organizing. And so there's a nice way in which both of these issues help each other. I mean, because all of these issues at the end of the day, they're all linked economically, and it all comes back to this kind of core of this issue of capitalism at the very core of it all. So people tend to recognize the knock-on effects that all of these things can have on each other. And, if we can get people to care about, one of these issues, we can get them to care about multiple of these issues. And unions are a really good place to organize around these kinds of things as well. And absolutely, I think that it would be great to see unions get behind like tangible political movements and come together collectively, to fight for this kind of stuff, for sure.
Thanks for that, Ellen. Yeah, just to draw out that point, I think during the summer, at the peak of the Black Lives Matter movement in the States, there was a strike mainly centered in the west coast of America, but it shut down all the major ports in the west coast, in San Francisco, up further north as well. And just the economic might that workers have in situations like that, I think that it really is a transformative power that we have, and it's something, unfortunately, I think, and even though there might be conversations around unionising in different political events and movements, it's not something you really feel, I think, until you're actually moving in that direction, until you've actually seen and been part of a collective. So maybe go back to that same question, you, Sarah. What role do you think the unions have to play in different political movements?
Well, I think they should be standing with every human being, basically. They should be making sure that they look after who their supporters are. They pay their dues. They should be standing out and working on their behalf, not just for a workplace issue, but social issues, personal issues, anything that they can bring their voice to, make it a bigger platform for people. They can spread it around to different companies that bring it on board, get them involved. Like, it's so many people are quite willing just to stand back and let everybody else do it. Let the activists get forward. But it's up to every human being to make their small part will make a big difference in the world. And if the unions backed it, companies would come to the ground and have to stand up and give the proper rights to each individual, not just who lives locally in the area, they're born here. It's people that have come over, they've worked hard for their degrees and their PhDs and their masters. Like, give them equal rights. They've come to this country. I know a few people that have come in, they're doctors and nurses in the Philippines, and they've come to Ireland and had to work as a carer because their paperwork isn't seen as higher quality as they would in Ireland or England or a European city. So, like, they should realistically, it should be taken on merit of what the person has actually gone to college and done. And then also political issues. This is where the union could come in and do this. They could get them up and running together. The unions need to come together themselves also. There's an awful lot of political background in the union too. So if they came together on certain issues, life would be a lot more different. It would.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Sarah. And I'm going to put that question to you as well, Jerry, because I know in your intro you mentioned how Unite Hospitality that you're involved with came out in support of the people that were prosecuted for going to a socially distanced Black Lives Matter rally in Belfast. So maybe you give us a bit of the practical knowledge you have on this.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think that Ellen's point about how that, like, social issues and trade union issues, these aren't isolated issues. They're all feed into each other. They're all interlinked, and that is part of the process that we're living under capitalism, and it stirs all these issues up. But I mean, trade unions most absolutely should be taking on social issues. They need to, because what's happening outside the workplace will bring itself into the workplace and shape or form. I think before talking about the Black Lives Matter protest, I just want to say that we're living now at a stage where the far right are starting to get a bit of an incline into body and to organise. How we crush them is in our workplaces, is with our might, by uniting. If we can even have one discussion with one quarter about why this is bad, then we can root that out, and it must be rooted out. But with the Black Lives Matter stuff, I think Unite Hospitality was particularly on the ball with calling it out. Some of our members were down on the day. I myself was volunteering as a steward. I did receive a fine at the protest. It was all socially distanced, and but the police decided to uphold their institutional racism on the day, as the state will. But I think that unions should be coming out and backing these movements for the betterment of all workers' conditions inside and outside the workplaces. It's absolutely central. They should be doing it.
Thanks for that, Jerry. So our next question is a little bit different. I'm going to go for a very practical question, and if you could all come in on it in kind of a rapid fire way, that would be great. So this one we have is, how do we put forward a motion in our branch? And to give an example, how can we send a letter of solidarity to Debenhams workers, for example? So how do we actually engage with our unions? How do we get them to do things we want them to do with motions? Maybe you first, Ellen.
Yeah, I'll be really rapid fire. So basically, we're a young union, so we're still in the process of creating an extremely formal structure that gives more roles to more people, which is the stage we're in at the moment. But at the moment, what we would do, and to any union members watching, I'm sure there's some as well, we speak quite often on a community Discord that we've created, like an online messaging platform, and so all of us can access one place and talk and discuss things. So they could collectively ask me to go forward and communicate directly with our union organisers and essentially put forward that the membership want us to send a letter of solidarity to the Debenhams workers, which I'd say we'll be doing very shortly. And yeah, essentially that would be the process at the moment.
Thanks for that, Ellen. And do you want to come in on that as well, Sarah? Because from your involvement in the trade union movement, I think you have a good sense of how things work in unions and sometimes don't work in unions as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, as with the Debenhams workers, I really feel it for them. They've gone out, they've done everything they possibly can. They're holding a picket for 180 days now. It's unheard of. It hasn't been happening since the 80s. We've asked our unions to step up and speak out for them. Unfortunately, they've got their own battles to fight at the moment. There's more and more places going into liquidation, but the only thing I can say is we'll keep on at the unions to stand and fight for the Debenhams workers. You know?
And what about you, Jerry? Have you anything to add on that? I know just from my own personal experience, the union that I first joined, it didn't have a branch. And it wasn't obvious to me, even though I was paying my dues, who I could talk to or where I could go if I wanted to put forward a motion, like for example, to support the Debenhams workers or to support the housing campaign. How have you found it in Unite in the North? And how would someone go about bringing a motion forward in a branch?
Yeah, well, thankfully, our branch itself is pretty in touch with its membership, you know, and probably to a certain degree that some of our members wish we weren't is in touch with them, with the amount of emails and text messages and all the rest. But I mean, having a visible branch executive or any branch leadership is really important. It needs to be visible, otherwise it's not going to work. But like it's for us, it's really much the same as what Ellen said. But because of our executive, we took the initiative and a hard drafted one ourselves. But it's a matter of meetings. Meetings is a great forum for discussion on those matters. So a member can propose anything at a meeting, and it can be debated there and then if it's in line with just the statutes and the rules of the branch. But I mean, definitely reach out. You should be already seeking, if you are a member of a trade union, you should already be looking to be in touch with your branch executive, you know, because we do need militant fighting unions, and the only way we can do it is through direct action. And as Ellen had pointed out earlier, that you have to be pushing yourself to do that. Otherwise, who's going to do it? You know, so definitely you need to be making a strides. Reach out to your branch committee if you want to do it, and even draft the wording. Save them the hassle, but definitely, yeah.
Thanks for that, Jerry. And yeah, just at this point, I think I want to encourage people again to get involved with us. We want to build healthy unions and rebuild kind of the traditions of branches that feed into union strategy and actually lead the union movement from below. So there is a link in the comment section, and as I said earlier, we are trying to connect workers in different unions to one another, so these conversations can happen. And there's a wealth of kind of practical knowledge there too, on things like bringing motions forward, on how to write them, and on how unions operate generally. So I think, yeah, if we're gonna rebuild unions, we need an organised force that will be able to we'll be able to learn from each other and teach each other in that process. So I'm just going to go to one more comment here, and then I might actually ask you a final question to kind of get you to wrap up. So this one is again a practical one. Hold on, no, that's the wrong comment. Here we are. So do you ever go into the union offices? I joined online and I don't know how to be a part of the union. So I'll go to you, Sarah, on that one first.
Yes, I have been into a union office. Oh, that was a bit playback. I have been into our union offices. It was to deal with an issue that we couldn't deal with in the workplace, so it had to be taken outside because it was bigger than what we could have anybody hearing. So that was the only reason. but I do know where it is. But if you do join online, you can get involved with your union. You will get a representative straight away. You have somebody that you can communicate with on your issues. If they're not on the phone or online that you can get in contact with, you can directly contact the office through the receptionist, and she will pass you on to somebody that's available. So just say your local representative is on holidays. She will give you somebody else. If there's an issue that needs dealt with there and then, she will give you another union representative to deal with you at that time, and they'll pass it on to your regular rep. Especially with being online, if you haven't got an online kind of contact with them all the time, you're not getting the relevant information on what's happening. So you need to double check with them, push them for the information, ask them questions. That's the whole point of the union, is that you're constantly asking questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Everything is relevant, and especially if you're asking the question, it's relevant to yourself. So don't hesitate to ring an office and actually speak to somebody, because they are there. When you are online, all the representatives have their own individual, especially with Fórsa, all their own individual pictures, emails and phone numbers underneath, so you can directly get in contact with them. Now, they're all in different areas, but if something's close to your area, they will give you the right person to go to. So don't hesitate to just pick up the phone, ring, or send multiple emails and wait for somebody to come back to you. Okay.
Thanks for that, Sarah. That's, I think, quite comprehensive. Do you want to add anything, Ellen, or you, Jerry, to that one, or will we move to our next question? Go on, Jerry, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make a brief point, and it's in reference to the last part of the question. Is there an either benefit to visit? I think, yes, absolutely, there is. Going in, meeting other union colleagues, other officials, you're going to establish links there with other branches and different struggles. And I think when push comes to shove down the line of your own experience, when you're trying to organise, those links will be absolutely vital, and it's a lending of knowledge, and it's a lending of experience, and I think it's absolutely central. So if you do visit, but please socially distance.
Absolutely. So we're coming up now to an hour and a half. So I think maybe what I'll do is I'll ask you a final question, kind of quite a broad one, and if you could try to answer them quickly. So we're a bit of a rapid fire round, and then I'll go back to all of you in turn if you want to add anything that you missed in the question. So I think the question is something we've maybe answered a little bit throughout the meeting, but why do you think unions are relevant today, particularly for precarious and young workers? A lot of people don't see the point. They don't see why they should pay a certain portion of their wages every week to be in a union. If you give us maybe one reason each and try to keep them different, that would be good. So a bit of a pitch here from each of us. Maybe go to Ellen first on this one.
Sure. Isolation is and practices and workplace issues can be really alienating. Community alleviates that in a massive way. It can be really heartening just to hear someone else say that they share the same issues as you, and together we hold the majority power. We hold collective power. We just need to claim that power, and we need to support each other to do that. And if you don't want to do it for, like I said, for yourself, do it for your worse off friends and colleagues that you know.
Thanks, Ellen. How about you, Sarah? Why should people join unions?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. It's your workers' rights that they're guaranteed, in a sense of you're not going to be walked over when you have backing of a union and your colleagues, and which is very easily done when you don't have that backing. You can be left on your $12.50 an hour job for the next 2 or 3 years until, oh, well, we'll give you a pay increase. So if you have that backing from your colleagues, and you're doing a very good job, they see you're doing a good job, they talk you up, they look after your best interest. The union's there to do all that. They're there to make sure that you're being looked after, in the sense of your rights are being followed. Management are looking after their staff. They're giving them the proper training, health and safety. It makes a huge difference to know that you're being looked after, in the sense of you're part of the community and you're getting what you're entitled to, basically.
Thanks for that, Sarah. And to you, Jerry, the same question.
Yeah, to be brief, I think that unions are so relevant again is because, as Connor had outlined at the start of his introduction, about how we're now facing a threefold crisis: pandemic, recession, and an ecological crisis. I think now more than ever, workers need their voice, and we have that voice for the expression of their collective within a trade union. Because when workers don't have a voice, they're left to pay for these crises, and we've seen that time and time again. We only need to look back to 2007 and 8. Who paid for the bailout? It was forced on us, but that would do it? No. So I think what needs to be absolutely central is workers getting organised in their unions to express that voice, because that's the only way we're going to put a stop to us having to pay for the capitalist class wrecking everything around us.
Absolutely. And I think that we can win as well. Like, all of the positive things, all of the things we value as workers were won by workers that came before us, fighting within unions, and fighting in a context, I think, that was a lot more challenging than the context we're in today. And you only have to look back to the history of radical trade unionism in Ireland and what happened in 1913 when workers are locked out of their workplaces, when there was actually fighting on the streets with the police and the army, the occupying army at the time. That we're not in those circumstances today, thankfully, but we can, if we stick together, win rights like sick pay. Like, there's no right to sick pay anymore in the South, and we've seen government recently voting that down when one was proposed. So I think these new rights, it's not just about protecting what we already have; it's also about winning more, winning new rights. And also, I think the ultimate goal here for us all as socialists is organising a different type of society. And I think if we're gonna challenge capitalism, which is really destroying the planet as well as people's lives, we're gonna need an organised force. And I think unions are the way to do that. So I'll maybe go to just each of you in turn just before we go. If you want to maybe add anything, if you don't, fair enough. But if there's anything you'd like to plug or say before we cut off, so maybe you first there, Ellen.
Hey, yeah. If you're at all interested in anything that we've been talking about, have a Google around, look for the places, look for the kinds of unions that represent your industry. If they don't exist, look into, similar to what I did, creating a union or an organization, and try to be actively involved and contribute to this whole effort. Like I said, to support the workers around you as well. If you're a game worker, you're not a member of a set, you should go to gwireland.org and have a look at some of the information we have. Call up some of our reps, ask them the tough questions, try to get answers for yourself, and try to actively be involved in local communities for what you're doing. And that's essentially what these union stuff is. It's just communities of people supporting each other.
Okay, Sarah, have you anything to add or say to our viewers before we finish up?
Yeah, so just with the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, get on, give them a ring, see where you stand with what type of union suits you, or unionconnect.ie. They are there to help. Basically, the union is citizens' advice with backup. So they're giving you your legal advice on what you can look for in a workplace. So don't hesitate to even talk to people, talk to your colleagues. If you're not in a union, do some research. It really is worth it. And at the end of the day, when you need somebody to back you up, they're there. They're there to do their job. You pay them not too bad. On your gross pay, it's around 1% to 0.5. It really is worth having the union behind you. And I'm going from the age of 16 upwards. It's not when something goes wrong. Join it now. Basically, you need to be in a union 6 months before they'll actually represent you in a scenario that you're going through, or disciplinary or anything like that you're going through. But 9 times out of 10, they will waiver that and do whatever they can for you. So don't hesitate to join a union. It really is worth it. Thanks very much. And thanks, Connor, for tonight. And John.
And thank you, Sarah, for coming along and speaking. And I'll give you, Jerry, maybe the last word before we wrap up.
Yes, thank you very much, Connor, and thanks, John, behind the scene. But yeah, the one point I want to make, I want to direct it to any of our Nordy viewers. I just want to say that if you are already in trade unions, speak to your trade union branch about supporting the Trade Union Freedom Bill that's being brought forward by Private Members Bill by Jerry Carroll in the Stormont Assembly. This bill will be giving unions back their teeth that they so thoroughly lost because of Thatcher's anti-trade union laws. So definitely, I want to say that join a trade union, but advocate within your trade union about supporting the Trade Union Freedom Bill, because when we repeal these anti-trade union laws, that's when we can actually start to win and fight better. So I want to just say thank you to the team, and thanks for the Trade Union Week being held.
Thanks for that, Jerry. Yeah, and just on that note, I want to make a couple of announcements. So first of all, Jerry mentioned there that this week is Trade Union Week. So it's a week of events put together by people for profit. So today was the first one of those, but we have a really, I think, great program of other talks, of more kind of small-scale workshops, and I think there will be a protest in Belfast actually during the week, and possibly in Dublin too, if restrictions allow, to highlight the Trade Union Freedom Bill that Jerry mentioned. So as an All-Ireland and 32 county organisation, we want to rebuild fighting unions north and south. So that Trade Union Freedom Bill that Jerry mentioned, we hope to follow up with a similar bill in the Dáil through representatives there sometime in the very near future. So dismantling the Industrial Relations Act hopefully will follow down here, will follow the success of repealing Thatcher's anti-trade union laws. So I'd like to thank all of our panel of Sarah, Ellen, Jerry, and John, of course, behind the scenes as well. I think this has been a great event, and to all of our viewers for tuning in. So I'd encourage you all, get involved, join a union, and sign up to help us rebuild fighting unions. Thanks very much. Good night.